At the end of July every year, the world's best cyclists finish the Tour de France beneath the Eiffel Tower on the cobblestones of the Champs-Élysées. Today, 20 miles away from the heart of Paris, they begin a week-long journey resembling a mini Tour de France called Paris-Nice. With the smell of spring in the air, it's once again time for the pro peloton to gear up for the first major European stage race of the season. Some of the sport's biggest names have lined up in France to test their early season fitness over the next 8 days at Paris-Nice. Tony Martin knows exactly what he has to do this afternoon, and when he crosses that line, he stops the clock with a brand new best time.
He will win Paris-Nice in 2011.
New and improved Team Omega Pharma Quick-Step have 2 cars to play in defending Paris-Nice champion Tony Martin and American Levi Leipheimer, who already has a win in 2012. Dubbed the super team of cycling, Radio Shack Nissan bring an all-star squad. Last year's second-place finisher Andreas Kloden is back and hopes to go one better. He will have the support of the strongest brothers in cycling, Frank and Andy Schleck, who have high hopes come July. On the flat stages, perennial fastmen Thor Hushovd and Tom Bonen will go head-to-head for sprinter supremacy. The battle for the yellow jersey begins today with a short 6-mile time trial. The epic cycle starts next on the NBC Sports Network. We're looking down here on the Vallée de Chevreuse, right outside of Paris, not too far away anyway, for the Epic Cycle Series presented by Michelob Ultra. And it's the first day of Paris-Nice, the 6-mile individual time trial from Dampierre-en-Yvelines to Saint-Rémy-lès-Chevreuse. I'm Paul Scher, alongside me is Bob Roll, and today, well, not quite ideal weather conditions, 52 degrees Fahrenheit, a 13-mile-an-hour wind coming from the southeast with a forecast of showers in the latter part of the afternoon. But Bob, the first time these guys are coming out to try a very difficult time trial today.
We have 10 of the top 15 Tour de France finishers from 2011. Paris-Nice is one of the cornerstones of a great career. Many Tour champions have begun their racing in the season here at Paris-Nice.
Well, it's a little bit for everybody. 8 stages, 718 miles, 2 time trials, a flat stage for the sprinters, a medium mountain stage, 4 mountain stages, and 3 summit finishes. 22 teams for 176 riders. Bob, really, it is, as many people say, a mini Tour de France.
Mini Tour de France starting in Paris, generally colder than the Côte d'Azur where it finishes. It is indeed the race to the sun. A time trial to begin the proceedings on stage number 1. Stage number 2, perhaps the only chance for the sprinters, a very flat stage on stage number 3. Then the climbing stages begin. Vierzon to Lac de Vassivier with the first mountaintop finish of this year's Paris-Nice, a very tough stage. Then we get into the Massif Central. Lots of rolling hills, very small roads, a tough, competitive breakaway type of stage on stage number 4. Then stage number 5, the Queen stage of this year's Paris-Nice, with a finish up the Col du Jalabert up to Mons, and that is going to be a brutal stage. Suze-la-Rousse is the start of stage number 6, another tough stage up to Sisteron. Then we get down to the Côte d'Azur. Their weather should be a little bit warmer, generally speaking. The traditional finish return since the first time since 1995 up the Col d'Ez in the time trial format.
And as everybody calls this, this is the race to the sun, starting in the very northern part of France and finishing right down on the shores of the Mediterranean. Well, the defending champion, we can't say too much about him. Tony Martin, the winner of this event last year, Bob, I have to say he had a really fantastic season last year with the World Time Trial Championships.
He has become the preeminent time trialist, the race against the clock, the race of truth. He's also a solid climber, and those 2 attributes help him win Paris-Nice last year.
Well, if he doesn't come up with the goods, Omega Pharma Quick-Step, a brand new super team this year. He can count on his teammates Levi Leipheimer from the United States of America, and of course the little joker in the pack, the Frenchman Sylvain Chavanel, with 2 Paris-Nice stage wins to his credit over the last couple of years.
Second place in last year's Paris-Nice, this man, Andreas Kloden, the German, on the Radio Shack Nissan squad, looking to go one better in this year's Paris-Nice. A great time trialist and a fantastic climber. He won this race way back in 2000. He'd love to do it again this year.
And I've got to say, Bob, he's got a very strong team behind him as well.
Domestique Deluxe, the Schleck brothers. Andy Schleck, the big snooze in the offseason, winner of the 2010 Tour de France. Because of the disqualification to Alberto Contador, he will be joined by his older brother, Frank Schleck, third place in last year's Tour de France, and he has done very well in Paris-Nice in the past.
Well, looking at the undulations here of this very famous Vallée de Chevreuse, this is where most of the Parisian cyclists come to ride their bikes on Saturdays and Sundays. But today, the riders in the Tour de France, Bob, face up to a very difficult individual time trial to start.
6 miles long, a testing first kilometer to stretch the leg that climbs 500 feet, or roughly 2 football fields in elevation, a twisty, tricky descent, technical corners before the finish. This is going to be a very challenging time trial. You have to race well right out of the blocks in this year's Paris-Nice to be successful.
Well, that's what it's all about when you ride an individual time trial. You have to be a specialist, and no better specialist, Bob, than Bradley Wiggins.
Bradley Wiggins, one of the best in the business at this discipline. He has already gotten the better of Tony Martin in the little race called the Tour of Algarve down in Portugal. He needs to start well. This is a good chance for Bradley Wiggins to get some time in the overall standing.
And don't discount the American threat. 2 young riders, Bob, on the way up.
TJ Van Garderen and Taylor Phinney, bright stars on the horizon for American cycling, and Paris-Nice, a major objective for both riders.
And of course, both of them very good individual time trialists. As we look down there on the Chateau of Dampierre, formerly the home of Louis XIV and 15th, when we come back after this very short break, it's straight into the thick and heart of the action at Paris-Nice. Looking down here on the magnificent chateau and the area around the start line in Dampierre-en-Yvelines, 87 riders have so far started on the opening individual time trial stage here of Paris-Nice, which gives us a little bit of a chance to look at the early leaders. Well, Sylvain Chavanel, starting early on, was one of the fastest men to come to the finishing line, but then all of a sudden he was beaten by Thomas de Gendt with a time of just inside of 49 kilometers an hour, just edging out Sylvain Chavanel and Markel Irizar of Radio Shack Nissan. But I have to tell you, just a few moments ago, maybe 20 or 30 seconds ago, Levi Leipheimer, Bob, went out onto the road.
Levi Leipheimer, in my view, the most successful current pro amongst the North American riders. He's won nearly every week-long stage race on the calendar. Paris-Nice has escaped him so far, but a great time trialist, a solid climber, Levi Leipheimer out on court.
A new team for Levi Leipheimer this year as well, Omega Pharma Quickstep, one of those new teams we're talking about as being the mega teams of this year by the amalgamation of 2 former squads from last year. He's on the climb, known in French as the 17 tournants, or the climb of the 17 turns, and it is around about a 5% gradient, 1 kilometer to go to the summit. The difficulty, Bob, about this climb is not the gradient, it's the fact that you're twisting and turning all the time, and it makes it very difficult to find yourself getting into a rhythm.
Well, today's sting in the tail is more like a cold slap in the face in the individual time trial.
Well, this is Gustav Larsson going back to the finishing line there. All of a sudden, it looks to me as if that was a very fast time indeed. We'll have to wait a couple of seconds to get that time, as it hasn't quite come up onto the graphic. But I'll tell you one thing, he looks to me as if he's given almost everything in that ride.
Gustav Larsson, the time trialing specialist of the Vacances Soleil squadron. A great ride by Gustav Larsson. They're getting the better of Thomas de Gendt.
Well, back to Levi Leipheimer out on course. Rather an inimitable style that Levi Leipheimer has here, Bob, for the individual time trial. Sometimes you would have to say that with all the rules and regulations surrounding the individual time trial, the machines and the position, being a shorter rider like Levi Leipheimer gives you the advantage in aerodynamics.
And he's used that aerodynamic advantage in nearly every stage race on the calendar. He's won them all: Tour of Switzerland, Tour of Colorado, and of course the Tour of California 3 times. In January of this year, Levi starting with a great season with a big stage win in the Tour of San Luis, beating none other than Alberto Contador.
Well, at 8 kilometers to go there for Levi Leipheimer, I can now confirm that Larsson did post the fastest time. Sorry about the little bit of the graphic blip coming through there, but this is a world feed coming to us directly from France. Gustav Larsson, Bob, has just gone through that finishing line with a time of 11 minutes and 19 seconds. That is an unbelievable beating of the current leader, Thomas de Gendt, of 11:31.
Lawrence Tendam, yep, excuse me, Paul, coming to the finish line. We might remember him from last year's Tour de France. A dramatic face-first crash on a descent in the Tour. He finished that stage covered in blood. Not so today. Not a great time trialist, but a solid performer for the Rabobank Dutch squad.
And let's not forget, Bob, despite that dramatic crash this man we're looking at here had in the Tour de France, he went on to finish the stage and to finish the Tour de France. Still out along the course, we've got Levi Leipheimer. You might have just noticed that white line. He's just gone over the summit of the Côte de 17 Tournon, and that will leave him around about 6 kilometers to go to the finish. That's 4 miles. But he has, of course, Bob, got that very tricky descent. And the roads there, to me, look like they're a little bit moist.
Well, rain showers predicted for the day. We don't know exactly when they might start to fall. But for the finishing riders, the riders in the second half of the rotation, maybe a little bit more treacherous conditions.
Well, climbing into the starting house now, Sylvester Smit from Team Liquigas Cannondale, previously a winner of a stage of the Dauphiné Libéré, a build-up race to the Tour de France at the summit of none other than the Mont Ventoux. Now, for him, he's lining up for this 9.4 kilometer individual time trial. Obviously, also looking up at the skies, because everybody wondering whether or not this afternoon the rain, which we are expecting to come in the latter part of the afternoon, will affect the outcome of this time trial.
Watching the start of Sylvester Smit, the Liquigas Cannondale rider, earlier in the day, Tour Hushovd, one of our best sprinters in the peloton, actually had a very good time trial. His time, 11 minutes, 36 seconds, just slightly slower than Thomas de Gent. So Tour Hushovd bringing some good form to Paris-Nice.
Yeah, Bob, as we look at the roads here, the roads are dry at the start before we actually get onto the first climb of the day, the Côte de 17 Tournon, and there is a King of the Mountains classification. This climb today is classified as a third category. Now, I wonder whether or not the team managers thought about this by putting riders like Levi Leipheimer out early on in the event this afternoon to take advantage of possibly slightly drier roads. We'll take a very quick break with Gustav Larsen, the new leader of this race, with 11 minutes and 19 seconds, leading by 12 seconds. Next Sunday, Major League Soccer launches on the NBC Sports Network, with FC Dallas taking on the New York Red Bulls. All rise for the new season of MLS next Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the all-new NBC Sports Network. Anyway, let's get back to the action here on stage 1 of Paris-Nice, just around about a 6-mile individual time trial. Bob, we're looking here at the Frenchman, Anthony Geslin. You get a chance to see this climb. By the way, this climb in years gone by was... Oh, there's a problem here. This is Sylvester Smit. He looks like he's had an individual problem.
Flat tire, perhaps, of the machine, waiting for a bike change, and that will ruin your chances to win the stage. Front flat, and that big time trial wheel, very tricky to maneuver, and you can see how different the regular road machine is. I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't have an extra time trial bike for Sylvester Smit.
Well, he's just going through 6 kilometers to go. I think the mechanic decided there the better part of valor, Bob, was just to quickly change the machine. He's gone straight across there. Psychologically, that's really not a good situation to be in, is it? It certainly isn't. But now coming down to the finish line, this is Christian Knies, one of the riders from Team Sky. The time that to beat, you can see the time of 11:19. That's not going anywhere at all. But Christian Knies for Team Sky is going to finish inside of the top 20.
Christian Knies, former road race champion of Germany, one of the domestiques on Team Sky, and Mark Cavendish will be depending on him in the sprint finishes throughout the season.
Yeah, well, as you can see, just looking back down there on that chateau, there's been a chateau on that site since 1180. The overall standings, as we stand here, Gustav Larsen still the fastest man, ahead of Thomas de Gent, 12 seconds adrift. Sylvain Chavanel in third place, but a lot of big names still to come down towards the end. This, Bob, is the big super team now. This is Maxime Montfort. He's a rider who this year said he actually doesn't want to ride well at the Tour de France. He wants to concentrate on the Giro d'Italia. In fact, he's threatening the time there of Thomas de Gent coming up to the finish line. 11:31. Is he going to get inside that time? Oh, he's just going to go past it. But this is a good ride by Maxime Montfort coming up to the finish line. Oh, it's a long way to go. 9th time for Maxime Montfort, Bob. A man I think Radio Shack Nissan can count on later on in the year.
Andreas Kloden will be depending on Maxime Montfort throughout this week's racing, and that's a solid start for his Paris-Nice in 2012.
Well, looking out from the helicopter here, Bob, it looks to me as if it's starting to get just a little bit hazy now. I wonder if the rain is going to start to come down a little bit later on in the afternoon. The next man we should get a chance to look at is Levi Leipheimer. Now, look at this time. Gustav Larsen is the time to beat. 11 minutes and 19 seconds. Levi Leipheimer has got that grimace on his face coming around these last few corners now. These last few corners are the ones where you can win or lose it. Lost a little bit there, a little bit of control now. He's into the finishing straight. Gustav Larsen, 11:19. Levi Leipheimer looking at a very good time now as he stops the clock. Second best time for the American Levi Leipheimer.
Less than 4 seconds slower than the current leader, Gustav Larsson, and changing conditions. A little bit more moist for Levi than Gustav. That's a great start of the week's racing for Levi Leipheimer.
And not to forget, Bob, he is coming off some pretty good form with that big bike race that he won down in South America. I have to feel that he's brought that form over to the Northern Hemisphere now, and he will be thinking, quite possibly with a good start like that, just 4 seconds adrift off a specialist like Gustav Larsson, that may well start to nurture thoughts of winning Paris-Nice this year.
Thomas de Gent still in third place. Solid ride by Levi Leipheimer for his new team, Omega Pharma Quickstep.
Well, this is Anthony Geslin again out on course, so you get a chance to see the wild positions of these bikes. This rider now getting himself into that tuck position at the front. Many of the top riders, Bob, they do a lot of work in the winter months to try and make their penetration into the air, their aerodynamics, a lot better.
Well, Anthony Geslin, not a specialist in the time trialing discipline. He's cut his teeth on the one-day races, winner of a semi-classic in Belgium, Flèche Brabançon, also Paris-Camembert, one of the biggest one-day races in France.
Well, coming into the finishing line now, this is John Degenkolb, and that last year, Bob, he really rose to prominence, this rider from Germany, as a sprinter. I'd have to say that the biggest win was the Ronde Frankfurt in the middle of May, and then, of course, 2 stage wins when he came to the Dauphiné Libéré. He's not going to do a great time here this afternoon, but he'll be thinking about the single flat stage for the sprinters.
He's on a new team this year, Project 1T4I, one team, 4 I's for innovation, inspiration, integrity, and improvement. They used to be called Skills Shimano.
Rolling out now, Grisha Neerman at 36 years of age. He's one of the solid riders of Team Rabobank. Not a great winner, but certainly a man they can always count on. But now, let's just remind ourselves of the overall standings. Gustav Larsson is the man to beat at 11.19, chased by Levi Leipheimer. Welcome back to the Epic Cycle presented by Michelob Ultra, and into the finishing line now, Sylvester Smith. Bob, not doing a great ride. This man is much better known for his mountain climbing abilities, and his time trial here this afternoon is going to leave just a little bit to request for.
Well, the bike change ruined any chance he might have had in such a short stage. Sometimes in a longer time trial where you can recuperate from a bike change, he doesn't have his aerodynamic time trialing machine, giving up the ghost and finishing in 85th position.
Well, look at the average time as well, 44.7 kilometers an hour for 12 minutes and 37 seconds. He has lost himself a minute and 18 seconds out on the course here this afternoon. As we look at him crossing the finishing line, watch for him a little bit further down. This, though, is David Moncucci. Now, this man, I tell you what, Bob, when you manage to get this man off the front end of a bike race, he can do wonderful things. 4 times he has been the king of the mountains at the Vuelta a España.
Coldo Gil Fernandez coming to the finish line, being hired by Garmin Cervelo. He was on the Euskaltel Euskadi team throughout his career, but this year he's been hired by the Garmin squad to help Tyler Farah in the sprint stages. This will be a serious lieutenant for Tyler Farah throughout the season. He'll be the big lead-out man. Well,
they've built up this squad to have a very fine lead-out train for Tyler Farah just a little bit later on in the season. He's not too concerned about this time test here this afternoon. 46 kilometers an hour for him. That's around about 28 miles an hour of racing. He's lost himself just inside the 1 minute mark, but more importantly for him, it's a little bit further down the road. As we look into his face there, you can see just how tough this has got to be. By the way, the chateau we keep looking at, the chateau of Dampierre, it was destroyed way back in 1670 and rebuilt, and was once the home of the Duc de Luynes. Now this is Anthony Geslin, the French rider. Alejandro Valverde disappearing away after his second place finish in the early part of this season in the Santos Tour Down Under, as Geslin comes around these corners. I have to say, Bob, looking at the road surface conditions, they do seem to be still somewhat varied.
Varied road conditions, still dry though. Anthony Geslin coming across the finish line, 48th at the moment. Anthony Geslin never would be considered a time trialing specialist. He'll be much better throughout the rest of the week of Paris-Nice. In the breakaways, watch for him to try to go for a stage win.
Yes, just again getting a chance to have a look at this magnificent valley. In fact, there's a spring around this area that the people who lived in this chateau way back in the 1780s actually allowed the French people to come and keep themselves topped up with spring water. I don't think this man needs any introduction at all. 40 years of age and still got the enthusiasm of a man of 16 or 17 when it comes to professional cycling. What can I say, Bob? Jens Voigt, Radio Shack Nissan.
Jens Voigt, probably best known, apart from his race wins, which are numerous throughout his long career, for his fighting spirit. Incredibly enthusiastic. He's a great teammate to have. He'll be 41 years of age this year. He's already done the Tour de France 14 times. Eloquent and unforgettable quotes coming from the tall German on the Radio Shack Nissan squad.
I have to say, he's got to be one of the most popular bike riders out on the international circuit, wearing here number 18. A little bit of chance, Bob, to talk about this team this year, the amalgamation of Leopard Trek from last year with Radio Shack Nissan to make a super team for this season. With a man like Jens Voigt as the team captain out on the road, they've got to go on to great things.
They should have a great season with Jens Voigt and the Schleck brothers, Andreas Kloden, an incredible constellation of stars on the Radio Shack Nissan squad for 2012. He was 5th in this race in 2010, so Jens Voigt still competitive in Paris-Nice. We'll see how he does in the time trial. Great climber. He's probably been hired here to help Andreas Kloden, the team leader of the Radio Shack Nissan squad. Jens Voigt, though, one of the most popular racers. It's great to have him in any bike race. He always comes up with the most brilliant quotes in the peloton.
Yeah, but Bob, normally you talk about the shorter time trials, like the prologue time trials, individual time trials like this at 9 kilometers, being more suited to the specialists or riders who are a little bit younger. But Jens Voigt 2 years ago actually finished 2nd in the prologue time trial here at Paris-Nice to a certain cyclo-cross rider by the name of Lars Boom. How does he come out and fight like that for every time he gets onto his bike?
Well, he loves to race his bike. He loves to train. He's probably one of the most consistently best prepared riders in the peloton. Every race he comes with the fighting spirit, with a chance to win. Jens Voigt was also in the breakaway that succeeded on stage 1 in Paris-Nice last year. He was looking for the leader's jersey, never quite came around, but he's always competitive, always in the mix.
Likes the aggression. You know what? He turned professional, Bob, back in 1997 for a small Australian team at ZVVZ AIS, Australian Institute for Sport. But then after that, after just 1 year, he got picked up by the GAN team of France, and there he was in that squad for a long, long time before he got pulled across to Team CSC, a team which in the early part of many seasons dominated this race we're looking at here, Paris-Nice.
And Jens Voigt, maybe the best known in results-wise for Criterium International. He's won that event on 5 different occasions. He's tied the record in Criterium International. That starts 2 weeks after Paris-Nice finishes, and it'll be right here on NBC Sports.
Yeah, we're just looking here, Bob, as the face of Jens Voigt. We get a chance every now and again to look at that machine that he's riding, a very special machine. Now, there's an international limit, not to the maximum weight of a bicycle, which you would think, but a minimum weight of a bicycle. It's 6.8 kilograms, which is just inside of 15 pounds. It's amazing. Since the time that you and I used to race, and bikes used to weigh 8 and 9 kilos.
Well, around 20 pounds was the standard. Now it's way down 5 pounds less than that from when we were racing. But I think that the bikes could weigh a lot less. But that's the limit that the UCI has set for the weight of the bicycle. But without sacrificing the integrity of the frame or any of the components, we could see bikes 12 or 13 pounds. But the UCI won't allow that just yet.
Well, they believe that making a bike a little bit too light makes it a little bit too dangerous. So it's all about safety. It's all about looking after the bike rider, and all about the tension and the forces that these guys use when they go around some of these corners, sometimes at 100, 120 kilometers an hour, 70 miles an hour. So Jens Voigt now summits the Côte de 17 Tournants, the climb of the 17 corners, and he now gets to the flatter part. He's now able to pick up that pace. You've got to make sure that you keep those revolutions just inside of the red zone. You don't want to go too hard, because once you get to the top of the climb, you have to accelerate and look forward now to the very fast descent. So we'll leave Jens Voigt out ploughing a lonely furrow and take a short break. Here we are now on the descent of the climb of the 17 Tournants. This is Jens Voigt. He's starting to pick that pace up. He will be touching speeds here of around about 45 to 46 miles an hour on the descent. But Bob, it really is quite a tricky little time trial that these riders are facing up to here this afternoon.
Quite technical on the descent, and a very hard climb at the beginning. A challenging opening stage in this year's Paris-Nice 2012.
Look at his bike bobbing along there, and his shoulders trying to get every last little bit of energy. Now, this is a man that we will talk about, I think, Bob, on American cycling for a number of years to come. And what a pedigree. Taylor Phinney, the son of Davis Phinney and Connie Carpenter Phinney. What a gene pool to come from.
A great gene pool to come from. Davis Phinney and Connie Carpenter, perhaps two of the greatest cyclists in the history of American cycling. Connie Carpenter won the first gold medal offered to women in the Olympics in the road race. Of course, Davis Phinney, one of the winningest racers in the history of American cycling. And Taylor Phinney, a little bit of of a time trialing specialist early in his career, and we'll see how he continues to develop throughout his career.
Yep, well, he gets up to speed very quickly. He made a name for himself when he won the prologue of the Enica Tour in August of last year. That's a race in the Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands and Luxembourg region of Europe. Very fast start for him. It's important, isn't it, to get into that high speed as quickly as possible. But I wonder, he's much better known as a track rider. His background comes from the track, racing on those velodromes, which are completely flat and fast. Will this climb at the start go against Taylor Phinney today?
The climb might affect Taylor Phinney, not the greatest climber in the history of cycling. He, by his own admissions, will tell you that, but he's so fast on the flats, coming from that track background. The climbing, however, might slow him down a little bit, take away his chance to win today's stage. He's so successful in the short opening time trials to a number of stage races in Europe. Taylor Phinney, a big star for American cycling.
Well, all I can say is enigmatic. That's the word to describe David Moncoutier. He's either at the front end of a bike race or at the back end of the main field, because he has this fear of riding in the peloton. Today, he's riding the individual time trial. I think he's a little bit concerned about the slight moisture starting to appear on certain parts of this course. Not going to be a great ride for Moncoutier this afternoon. 77th place for him. But watch out when Paris-Nice goes up into the hills, because maybe he could be thinking about a King of the Mountains title. But we are talking about this man. This is Taylor Phinney, a great athlete. Bob, the start of his professional career was probably not what he expected it to be. He was dogged by injury, illness, and maybe not quite as dedicated as he ought to be.
Well, tons of expectation, lots of pressure on the young rider from the BMC squad. Taylor Phinney, especially considering his pedigree as the son of two very famous racers. But Taylor Phinney, I think he'll continue to make a forward progress in the sport of cycling, and this year will be very interesting to see how Taylor progresses.
Well, a man who's won stages in the Tour de France, Peric Fedrigo, former French national road racing champion. This man knows how to pull a win out of the bag, doesn't he?
He certainly does. 3 stage wins in the Tour de France in his career. Also, 2 years ago, winner of Criterium International. There is Taylor Phinney getting his way through this climb of the 17 turns.
Well, the thing about Taylor Phinney on a team like BMC Racing, he's got a lot of experience to call upon. He's got George Hincapie, who this year will be, we hope, participating in his 17th Tour de France. That's an all-time record for participations, and of course riding alongside last year's winner, Cadel Evans.
Taylor Phinney teammates with Cadel Evans. There's a time trialing machine. You get a chance to look at that little blue transponder, and that will take the time of the riders when they're out on course.
Well, this is Javier Moreno coming up. This is one of the riders from Team Movistar, a rider we will expect to see aggressive once we get out onto the open road of this year's Paris-Nice. Not a great ride by him. Most of these riders still looking to challenge to the time at the top of the leaderboard set by Gustav Larsen. Of course, let's not forget Olympic silver medalist in Beijing, and he has a time of 11 minutes and 19 seconds. Back with Peric Fedrigo of France.
One of the big stars of French cycling, former road champion of France, a solid, steady performer in the Tour de France with 3 stage wins. For the French rider of the current generation, it's the ability to go in breakaways. None of them are a threat to the GC in the Tour de France generally, so Peric Fedrigo has become a specialist at the long breakaways and has come up with 3 stage wins in the Tour.
On the back here of Taylor Phinney, still out on the course, wriggling his body to try and keep that space as high as possible. We rejoin the finish line now. This is the American Danny Pate, former under-23 world time trial champion. Ooh, you just might have noticed him going around that corner. A number of riders this afternoon, Bob, have been slightly concerned about that dampness coming into the finishing straight. 24th for Danny Pate, but his season will be opened up a little further down the road when he starts to look after a certain Mark Cavendish, a winner of the green jersey in the Tour de France last year.
Taylor Phinney still plowing a lonely furrow, as you so eloquently put it, Paul, out on the time trial. A lot of pressure on the young man from Boulder, Colorado. Great time trialist. Also in the under-23 category, he won Paris-Roubaix twice. So he's hoped for in the future to become a classic specialist.
Fighting into the finishing line. Look at this. This is a good time by Jens Voigt, 40 years of age. And Jens Voigt now is challenging the time of Levi Leipheimer. He will fight all the way down to the line. Well, Jens, big Jens, we like to call him, into the final few little squirrels round this corner now, and he's challenging the time of Digent. That's gone by, but Jens Voigt wants a top 10 position here this afternoon. Yes, he's got it. 9th place finish for Jens Voigt, losing 16 seconds. And I tell you what, Bob, 16 seconds adrift. That's going to start to put Jens Voigt back up in the title of challenger for Paris-Nice this year.
Well, the individual time trial is a window into the soul of the bike racer, and you can just see how ferocious Jens Voigt must be.
Well, Taylor Phinney now will be one of the next riders to come up to the finishing line. We'll take another very short break and come up with the heated action of Paris-Nice. Don't forget, tomorrow the Epic Cycle Series presented by Michelob Ultra continues with Stage 2 of Paris-Nice. It's a stage suited for the sprinters tomorrow at 4:30 Eastern Time on the NBC Sports Network. Well, let's not forget, Bob, tomorrow the sprinters have their rare chance to come out and do battle against each other as we watch Evgeny Petrov go out onto his start. But this is going to be a big week, a big testing week with some names: Leipheimer, the Schleck brothers. There's a lot of action to mix in.
The mountains will come later on in Paris-Nice throughout the week, but tomorrow, the only sprint stage, Thor Hushovd will line up against Marcel Kittel. I want everybody to take note of Marcel Kittel, a new name on the block for the sprinters, won 17 races last year, and he's looking to do something in Paris-Nice on tomorrow's stage. Tom Bonin also comes, and Elia Viviano, the Italian on the Liquigas team, 2 stage wins in last year's USA Pro Cycling Challenge in Colorado.
Well, what about a sprinter? Greg Henderson as well coming into the finishing line. His game this year, another transfer through the winter season, moving across to the Lotto squad. He's here really later on in the season to look after Andre Greipel. But don't forget that very experienced sprinter, Bob Thor Hushovd. 29th place there for Greg Henderson, losing himself at 30 seconds. He too coming off an early season campaign in the Santos Tour Down Under in Australia.
That's a solid time trial for a sprinter. Greg Henderson comes in with some good form to Paris-Nice, and of course later in the year, like you said, Andre Greipel will be depending on him to match the speed of the lead-out train from Sky and Mark Cavendish. That's going to be a great rivalry throughout the season.
It's going to take us a while, Bob, to figure out who's gone to which team, because there have been so many changes through this year's winter months, so many amalgamation of teams disbanding and reforming. But one thing is for certain, Taylor Phinney is a man that we want to talk about a lot. He has the pressure on his shoulders. It's difficult, isn't it, Bob, when you've got a famous mother, a famous father, and you've got to come back and ride for yourself. What sort of pressure is on the shoulders of this young man?
Well, a ton of pressure also that he puts on himself. He wants to be successful. This perhaps is going to be a very telling season for Taylor Phinney. It's his second year as a professional. He admitted in the off-season last year and throughout the year he wasn't as serious as he needs to be. It takes a while to learn the pro game, and you cannot make any mistakes in your preparation for any race because it is so very competitive one day to the next. Watch for Taylor Phinney to make some small improvements in his training, his diet, his rest, and his seriousness about the sport, and get to the top of the leaderboard in his specialty, the time trials.
Well, this is Astana's Evgeny Petrov, a Russian rider. If you can't turn your clock back to the year 2000, this young man at the under-23 level of the sport was the world road racing champion and the world time trial champion, and it was on the roads of France around Plouay. He's looking reasonably comfortable here too, Bob, with the climb of the D-set tunnel. But we go back to a study of speed. This is speed, this is aerodynamics. Look at that body position there of Taylor Phinney, Bob. It's hardly moving, those legs pumping away like massive pistons.
He has got great power, and it's a short event. He's only 21 years of age. It should suit him perfectly. The climb might take away a little bit of his chances to have success on today's stage, but as his tactics develop, as he progresses in his career, watch for Taylor Phinney to start putting it all together. The talent is most certainly there, and it's just a question of doing everything exactly right to be successful out on the open road.
Well, the thing is, this course is a difficult course, you know, with that climb at the start. It maybe was a little bit difficult for him to get into that rhythm, but just looking at him here, the position looks good to me. He's in a nice position on his bike. He's still tucked down right in the middle of his handlebars. It's not a bad time, but that's deceptive. It's an awful long way to go to the finishing line. He's challenging the time now. Leipheimer's gone by. Thomas de Gent has gone by around these corners. I would think, just looking at this time, Bob, he could just possibly fit inside of the top 10 or 15 riders with this surge to the line now coming for Taylor Phinney as he stops the clock. Well, that's not too bad, is it? 13th place for him, 18 seconds adrift. Maybe, Bob, the climb of the 17 corners went against him in the first 4 kilometers.
I think the climb might have hurt, but the finishing part of the course on today's stage were favorable to Taylor Phinney. 13th against the very best in the world. That's a solid result.
Well, as we continue to look around here, the Vallée de Chevreuse is this region we're looking around, and it is in the Département of Les Yvelines, which is just outside of Paris. In fact, if you wanted to grab your bike and ride into the Champs-Élysées from here, it would take you a mere 36 kilometers or 24 miles of racing. Now then, back with Evgeny Petrov, Team Astana, getting themselves together, thinking about a little bit further down the road, the concentration on this man's face. He's not moving around very much at the front end of his body either, is he, Bob? Because he is a good individual time trialist.
Petrov, the teammate of none other than Alexander Vinokurov. He's the leader of Astana. Astana, winners of the Tour de France with Alberto Contador a couple of years ago. Contador, of course, now on the Saxo Bank team. Contador will not be joining us in Paris-Nice. He started to serve his suspension for a doping positive from way back in the 2010 Tour de France.
Well, the roads are, for the moment, are still very clear and dry. Certain parts of this course, Bob, have got a little bit of moisture on the route. That could be because we're going through some very forested area. Looking there, that is the small climb. That's the town at the top there of Chateau Fort. Again, a climb that very often the Tour de France used to go through. Now, Peric Federigo, former road racing champion of France, coming into the finishing straight. We are still looking for somebody to beat that time of Gustav Larsen set many minutes ago of 11 minutes and 19 seconds. And Peric Federigo is not going to do that at all as he gets out of the saddle. He wants to try and stop that clock as soon as he can. You might just have noticed the name at Nicholas Roach going through there. 57th time for him. 11:19 then is still the time to beat. And Federigo has lost himself 45 seconds.
He will be looking for the breakaways throughout the rest of Paris-Nice, but not a great time trial.
Well, we talked about this man. He will be the winner of the 2010 Tour de France following the disqualification of Alberto Contador just weeks ago. But this year, Andy Schleck will have to prove to us today, Bob, probably how much his time trialing has improved, because that has always been this man's Achilles heel.
Andy Schleck starts his chance to win this year's Tour de France right now in the Stage 1 time trial of Paris-Nice. He needs to put in a big effort to give himself and his team confidence in his time trialing ability. Over 100 kilometers of individual time trialing in this year's Tour de France. Andy Schleck has to improve to have a chance to win the Tour de France again.
Well, Bob, let me just put that into American money there, because in fact over 100 kilometers of racing is 65 miles of individual time trialing in the Tour de France next year. That will certainly go against this man we're looking at, Andy Schleck. But this time trial might be a little bit short for him at just 6 miles, but the advantage might tip towards him if we think about the climb in the early part of the event.
Category 3 climb to start today's stage. That will benefit the talents of Andy Schleck slightly, but also concentration. You don't have the hand-to-hand combat that you see in the peloton, and some riders just have a natural affinity for racing against their competitors. And when you're out in the individual time trial by yourself, it gives us a chance to see the grace and power of the individual rider outside the sheltering confines of the peloton. We don't call it the race of truth for nothing.
No, we don't, but the race of the truth at the moment is telling us Gustav Larsen is still the time to beat. 11:19.
Head Sweats, the world leader in performance headwear, is a proud sponsor of the Epic Cycle. Check out our new Super Duty collection featuring superior moisture management and perspiration technology. Use the code PARINICE at headsweats.com and receive 30% off your next online purchase on all Head Sweats headwear. Restrictions apply.
Welcome back to the opening time trial stage here of Paris-Nice. We're looking down onto the shoulders of Andy Schleck of Team Radio Shack Nissan. I have to say, the one thing that might go to the advantage of Andy Schleck a little bit further down the season, Bob, is the fact that he's got a master technician looking after him this year. His name, of course, Johan Brunel.
Johan Brunel, the team manager of Radio Shack Nissan, will be hoping to guide Andy Schleck to an outright win in the Tour de France. Of course, improving his time trialing ability is critical to success, especially the way the Tour de France route is laid out this year.
Well, this is Jonathan Hiver of the team Soja. He's been a professional since 2006. He used to ride for the team Crédit Agricole. Had a good start to the season last year with a very good win early on in the Ruta del Sol, and then followed that up with a win in the Classica Primavera. 27 years of age. In fact, this is one of the teams that last year was selected as a wild card. Now, that little blue box you can just see on the back there, Bob, that in fact is a transponder, and that allows us to give exact timings of the riders when they finish the line.
And also the time taken from the beginning of the time trial to the top of the first climb out on the course, only climb out on the course, at Category 3, that would be used by the blue cage right there on the back wheel of this rider, Jonathan Hiver.
I have to tell you, that was a little bit close there. Just watch him coming around this corner, that little traffic island in the middle there. Well, there can't have been more than 2 or 3 inches to spare, and I think that's probably because he may well not have timed this course at full speed. Let's go back to Andy Schleck now, because Andy Schleck would like to win the Tour de France in his own right. We do know that he's been given the victory of the Tour de France 2010 because of that long extrapolated affair against Alberto Contador, but he wants to be the man to seriously win the Tour de France on his own. And if he's going to do that, I have to say he's got a very good, strong squad around him. Right, back down to Jonathan Yver. You can see by the build of this man, can't you, Bob? He's a bulky rider, fairly thick set. That would tell me that he's actually a sprinter rather than an individual time trialist.
Does not have the Angeline pedaling style of a specialist like Tony Martin, Fabian Cancellara, and of course not noted as a time trialist. Sauer, one of the wild cards in the Tour de France last year, and it's because of their performances in the early season races. Yver won a couple of those last year, and they were selected to do the Tour de France. Very important for all teams, but especially the French teams like Sauer.
Well, as we look at this helicopter shot here of Andy Schleck, Bob, let's discuss his position a fraction there, because I've always thought that the problem with Andy Schleck when it comes to the individual time trial is because he normally sits up an awful lot at the front of the machine. That makes it as if he's got a big breaking of the wind with his shoulders. But looking at Andy Schleck now, it appears to me that he's managed to get the front end of his body that little bit lower, and he keeps tucking his head down to get himself a bit more aerodynamic. This could be a first good test for him.
A very good test for Andy Schleck, and we'll see from this stage to the rest of the season. He's going to compare his effort here, try to make improvements. He's done a lot of work in the offseason to improve his individual time trialing. We'll see the finish of Andy Schleck. Not a great effort so far, I can tell you that.
Well, we've got to see the time once he gets around this corner again. You can see the lights on that finish line as well, Bob. It looks to me as if there's a little bit of moisture starting to reappear there. He doesn't look uncomfortable, but again, he's still very high up on his machine at the front end. He's got that grimace. He's tried hard this afternoon, but again, he's not going to finish inside the top 100 riders in an individual time trial. To me, losing 1 minute and 1 second early on in the season, it doesn't bode well for winning the Tour de France, does it?
This is a disastrous time trial for Andy Schleck. He needs to be better than this. You can see the disappointment on his face. He saw the clock. He looked down at the road. He needs to find some speed in the time trial somehow, some way. If he's going to ever win the Tour de France outright, he was given the win because of the disqualification of Contador in 2010, but he does want to win the Tour de France outright eventually.
Well, we're looking at another new colour jersey this year, that Team Saxo Bank, a very dark royal blue there, and this is Karsten Kroon. Formerly, for 2 years, he rode alongside Cadel Evans on Team BMC, but he did ride for Team Saxo Bank way back in 2009. He's one of those riders who many teams like to have on board because he's a solid team worker, isn't he?
Well, it's going to be a very challenging season for Team Saxo Bank. Contador out of the sport until August. Contador coming back for the Tour of Spain, but there's an awful lot of racing between now and then, and Team Saxo Bank will depend on riders like Karsten Kroon to get some results before Contador can come back.
Well, lest we forget the leader of the event so far, still Gustav Larsen, 11:19, 4 seconds faster than Levi Leipheimer, who put in a solid individual time trial and an early starter. Thomas de Gent still up there in third place, but still some of the big names yet to come. Over the top now of the 17 Tournant, the climb of the 17 corners, is Karsten Kroon. You see how he's picked up that pace-making very, very quickly once he gets to the flatter part of the course.
Ticking that gear over rather efficiently is Karsten Kroon, not a time trialing specialist. He's more of a one-day classic rider. Saxo Bank hiring him theoretically to help Alberto Contador in the Grand Tours. Karsten Kroon coming back from a horrific crash in the Flèche Wallonne a couple of years ago, and it's great to see Karsten Kroon out on the open roads racing again.
Well, he's a rider of great experience, turning professional back in 1999, and in fact in the first year that he really took the racing seriously was in 2000, when he in fact led the King of the Mountains in the Giro d'Italia after a breakaway in a torrential day of rain, which gave him a very early lead in that competition. But just look at the road surface here, Bob. But every now and again there's a bit of a moist patch on the left-hand side, a dry patch on the right-hand side. That makes it very, very difficult for riders going round corners like this, wondering what the exit of the corner is going to be like.
Yver had trouble with that corner, and now Karsten Kroon even more trouble. I wonder if the roads are starting to bleed moisture a little bit because the humidity is so high.
Well, that nearly took the wind out of me, I have to say, but now we're looking here at Yver stopping the clock with a time of 54th, and that was 40 seconds adrift. I have to tell you, 1 second, Bob, my heart almost stopped there just looking at Karsten Kroon as he came around that corner. He was lining himself up perfectly as he started to come around that corner, but I tell you one thing, it's all about coming out of the corner properly. Look at that.
Well, sometimes when you lean into a corner and you feel your tires starting to give, you have to adjust your line. Karsten Kroon, very creative going through that corner.
As we take another short break, it's still the man to beat, Gustav Larsen. Welcome back to the Epic Cycle Series presented by Michelob Ultra. We're on the first stage, the individual time trial of Paris from Dampierre to Saint-Rémy-lès-Chevreuse. I'm Paul Sherwin, alongside me is Bob Roll, and I have to say, Bob, through this part of the race so far, we've seen some very dramatic riders. Igor Anton, for example, is a man who last year won two of the most magnificent stages in the Grand Tours, one of them to the top of the massive Zoncolan in Italy.
Winner of a stage in the Giro to the Zoncolan, one of the toughest climbs in all of cycling. Also got a Vuelta stage win, so great riding by Igor Anton, a part of the orange armada of Basque fans that always cheer for the riders on Euskaltel Euskadi. Watch them come out in force in this year's Tour de France when we get into the Pyrenees.
And let's not forget, he won a very prestigious victory in the King of the Mountains classification in the Tour of Beijing, which was the last race in the World Pro Tour Series. And I have to say, we're looking at him here on the 17 Tournant. Now, just look at his gear, Bob. In fact, he's decided to keep the chain on the large chain ring in the front and the large sprocket at the back, because it gives you an indication, in fact, of the steepness of this climb over the summit here.
Well, you can compare his style on the bicycle with Levi Leipheimer, who did nearly all of the climb on the drops in the aerodynamic position of the time trial bikes. Igor Anton not noted as a time trialist unless it goes straight up into the heavens.
Well, he's a great climber, and that's what this team is all about. This is one of our popular teams, the team from the Basque Country, Euskaltel Euskadi. They always go out on the attacks when you hear names like the Alps, the Pyrenees, or even the Dolomites. That's what it's all about. We're looking at a situation at the moment where some of the early starters are still leading this race, the individual time trial, just inside of 6 miles of racing. Gustav Larsson is the man to beat. Levi Leipheimer is a name right up there in second place. But we're looking at, again, one of the new changes of teams. Richie Porter, the best young rider a couple of years ago in the Giro d'Italia. He wore the pink jersey of leadership in that race as well for a long time, 3 days in fact. But now, Bob, what's he going to do in Paris-Nice?
Well, he's a great time trialist. He comes from a triathlon background. He's already won the Tour of Algarve. He did a great climb, which is unique to the style of Richie Porte. Also, he did a solid time trial just behind Tony Martin and his teammate Bradley Wiggins in order to consolidate his lead in the Tour of Algarve, and came out the overall winner already in a stage race for this season. Sky is riding great. Mark Cavendish has got some quality wins already, but Richie Porte delivering big results for the Sky team already.
Yeah, the Volta Algarve, that was just a little while ago in the month of February. We're now looking at Carsten Kroon. Well, we might have done him a little bit of injustice saying he's not a great individual time trialist, because he's actually coming in with rather a solid performance here this afternoon. He is just about going to stop the clock inside of the top 25, or is he? No, he's not. 26th. Then make a liar out of me if you'd like to. So I have to say, a lot of interesting times now, but again, not one of the great time trialists of the sport. But when it comes to the Tour de France, the Giro d'Italia, or any of the major stage races, Frank Schleck is a man to count on.
Frank Schleck, the older brother of Andy Schleck, not, like you said, Paul, a noted time trialist, but he is a solid performer in all the stage races, a big star of the Tour de France, finishing on the podium last year. He was third, just behind his brother Andy. Not a great time trialist, but we'll see how he can do on today's course. He's come here to help Andreas Klöden win the overall at Paris-Nice.
But he's a different kind of performer, isn't he, Bob? I think Andy Schleck now has got it in his mind that he wants to just ride the Tour de France. He wants to win the Tour de France. He wants to prepare for the Tour de France. That's all he has in his mind. However, Frank, who we're looking at here on the other hand, he's a kind of rider. He'll ride the Amstel Gold Race. He'll ride the Liège-Bastogne-Liège, the one-day races, which are the great classics and icons of the sport, and yet he can still be competitive when it comes to riding races like the Tour de France. A different mentality. This now is the face of Tom Boonen. He's been a champion of the world, and this year I think Tom Boonen has got himself back to the form he had a couple of years ago. We saw him dramatically crash out of the Tour de France last year. 4 victories so far this season, with a win in the Tour of Qatar and the overall victory at that race too.
Back to Frank Schleck here on the climb to start today's stage, the individual time trial to open up the racing in Paris-Nice. This little climb should help Frank Schleck get a little bit better time, but his brother did an abysmally poor time trial a little bit earlier in the day, finishing outside already the top 100 riders. Frank Schleck, like you said, he has a chance to be competitive in other races throughout the year, and indeed won the 2011 Criterium International and defended his lead in the individual time trial. So Frank a little bit better at the discipline than his brother, but neither one of them will probably challenge for today's race win.
Well, turn the clock back to 2009. He finished second overall in this Paris-Nice race, having won himself a stage in the Amgen Tour of California at the time, and that was way back a long time ago in 2009. But then ever since, he's always been a good man. He won, in fact, do you remember how he won the Tour of Switzerland in 2010 on the final day in the individual time trial? He'd even gone right the way back to his team bus because he thought he had no chance. We're looking now at the shape of Richie Porte. He's a man I think that Australia will count on to maybe replace Cadel Evans as a Tour de France winner in the future.
Star of the future here, Richie Porte, a young rider, a great time trialist. He actually has a chance to win today's stage. He could do something special in today's race. This is his specialty, the individual time trial. A very disciplined rider, great pedaling stroke, and also incredibly aerodynamic on the time trialing bike.
Looking at Richie Porte here, he knows how to ride a good time trial, come out of the starting gate nice and hot, have the engine ready to rock and roll, and once you get to the top of the climb, accelerate and go as fast as you can down towards the finishing line. Well, the race situation, one more break as we go away. Still the man at the top, Gustav Larsen. Well, I tell you what, Bob, it'd be a 1-2 if we could see Ivan Basso getting across the line in first place with a very good header. But on this occasion, he rolls down for 9.6 kilometres, just inside of 6 miles of racing. And looking at Ivan Basso, Liquigas Cannondale, I think finally he's decided to put the Tour de France to one side. And I think for the rest of his career, the final few autumn months of his career, he's going to concentrate on the Giro d'Italia.
Of course, being an Italian, he loves the Giro d'Italia. He's been successful there before, winning the Giro overall title in his career. He loves the pink jersey, and of course, he's not noted as an individual time trialing specialist, a great climber, but he does have the resistance and the concentration to defend his lead in the individual time trials. Also a very cosmopolitan rider, races all over the world. It was great to see him in the USA Pro Cycling Championships at the Tour of Colorado last summer.
Yeah, well, I have to say, though, he's 34 years of age, and when you look at an explosive opening time trial like this, these short time trials are between 4 and 7 miles in length. It's difficult when you get that bit older because you've got to really come out of the starting ramp red hot and ready to go. You've almost got to have 2 turbos whistling.
And the younger riders, especially really good at the early season. The veterans, it takes them a while not only to warm up in individual races, but also as the season progresses. But once the endurance kicks in, Ivan Basso a little bit of an advantage, getting into the twilight of his career, but he's been one of the biggest stars of cycling throughout his race career.
If you just get a quick glimpse at the back of his machine there, Bob, you see that little tail fin there. I wonder what the International Cycling Union will think about that. They do not like bikes that appear to have some kind of aerodynamic attachment to them. That, a little bit of discussion later on in the season, I suspect. Looking now here at Igor Anton, he is a great climber. He's coming to the end of this individual time trial here this afternoon, whipping around those corners, gets his hand on the outside of the handlebars. You might just have noticed that little maneuver there. That's to make his bike that little bit more maneuverable and to get out of the saddle and force his bike to the line again. Not a great time by him. 1:01. He's lost himself pretty close to a minute in just 6 miles of racing. That's how important the opening time trial may be, because the opening time trial for 1 or 2 riders could find themselves losing Paris-Nice completely. Now we're looking down there very quickly here at Richie Porte. Porte is a good time trialist. He knows how to do that. He finished 4th in the World Time Trial Championships a couple of years ago, and of course that was on home soil in Geelong in Victoria, down in the southern part of Australia. And talking about Australians, what about this man, Heinrich Hausler? He's had a lot of ding-dongs too, hasn't he, Bob, recently, with a lot of injuries and illness.
Heinrich Hausler in the start house. We did miss the start of TJ Van Garderen, the young American star on the BMC squad. TJ Van Garderen out on course. We'll be very curious to see how TJ does as Heinrich Hausler gets his time trial underway.
Well, let's bear in mind we are not in control of where the cameras are going here. This is a world feed being provided to us by the French as we go back to Ivan Basso. Now, Bob, look at this. These little spots are now starting to appear. And there was the time check just at the side of the road. The little spots appearing on the camera for the first time now this afternoon. That rain that has started to be promised is appearing on this event. Now, that's going to make a difference to all of these guys who finished, because, yes, it's not so bad on the climb, taking the riders about 3 minutes to the summit of the climb here at the climb of the Côte de 17 Tournant, but on the descent it's going to make it a lot trickier, and some of the big names may lose time on the corners.
Well, advantage to Gustav Larsson, an early starter. Advantage to Levi Leipheimer in the overall standings. Levi safely in the finishing town. He's already finished. He had a great time, and this rain now falling on the course, it wouldn't matter if there were nothing but long straightaways, but because there's technical corners before the finish line, that could make a big difference in the average speed of the riders starting later in the rotation on today's stage.
That's Richie Porte then, riding now for Team Sky Pro Cycling, looking very powerful indeed, tucked right in at the front end. He almost looks like he's got the body of a puncher, but that young man, he knows how to climb. As we slowly fade back to the arms there of Ivan Basso, trying to put in a fine performance here in the time trial here this afternoon. But Bob, I have to start to worry about the riders who are going to start in the last few places. Riders like Tony Martin, Andreas Kloden, Bradley Wiggins. Those are the guys who need to ride well, but this weather may well start to change an awful lot. This now is Rojas coming in for Team Movistar. Wore the green jersey as the leader of the most consistent rider in the Tour de France last year. He's coming in with a solid ride here for a sprinter.
Great ride for a sprinter. JJ Rojas will finish the stage at this moment in 40th. Watch out for Rojas, one of the kamikazes of the sprint, to be competitive on tomorrow's sprint stage number 2.
Well, I tell you what, still the man to beat, Gustav Larsson, but I have to think now that one or two riders are starting to queue up and think about beating that time. He's got a big advantage over Levi Leipheimer now. Into the finishing area now is Richie Porte. Doesn't look like a man who's slowing down. Sorry about the little bit of picture freeze up every now and again now, but the time to beat is going to be 11:19. Richie Porte has gone outside of that, but don't worry about that. This is the first day of Paris-Nice here this afternoon. That face is one of concentration on the Australian. He goes around those corners. He's still got a dry finish, but what's it going to be for the other riders who will be starting in a few moments' time? Crosses the line, 12th time for Richie Porte, 17 seconds adrift. But again, Bob, we're talking about a contender here for the possible victory after a week of racing.
Solid effort by Richie Porte. He might have hoped for a little bit more, but he'll have to be content with the top 20 finish on today's stage. Decent ride by Richie Porte. I'm wondering if the conditions didn't disintegrate and slow him down a little bit.
I don't think I need to introduce this young man to anybody in the world of professional cycling, because this, of course, we used to call him Little Tommy Voeckler, but we can't call him Little Tommy Voeckler anymore, Bob, because he has a huge reputation. This man wore the yellow jersey in the Tour de France for 10 days, only to be dethroned by Lance Armstrong. Turn the clock back just to last year. He wore the yellow jersey for 9 days. Nobody would have expected him not to get blown away in the mountains, yet Thomas Voeckler finished in 4th place overall. Phenomenal.
4th overall, a great finish. The first time in many years that a Frenchman was competitive in the Tour de France. It was so huge for French cycling that Thomas Voeckler now is perhaps the biggest star in all of French cycling. That's engendered a lot of animosity in the peloton. Thomas Voeckler, I'm not sure if he's 100% accurate on this, but he doesn't think himself the most popular racer in the peloton.
Well, I think I would agree with him, Bob, because cast your mind back to a certain Claudio Chiappucci who attacked whenever the racer was not expecting it as we go to the finish line. Frank Schleck now, again, probably going to do a little bit better than his brother, but not great. Not great as an individual time trialist, I have to say. Johan Brunel has got an awful lot of work to do throughout the rest of this season to get these two boys, Andy Schleck and Frank Schleck, ready for the Tour de France. Ooh, 102nd place for him. I think he just scraped inside of his brother. I wonder what Johan's going to say at dinner tonight.
I don't think there will be a lot of smiling faces at the Schleck end of the table. That's over 100 placings. That's very slow time trial for Frank Schleck. That's a bit of a disaster. They wanted to do a lot better than that.
Well, that'll be Johan Brunel. Now, as we look at Tom Bonen, now that's a good ride for a sprinter. Now that's a sign of form. 9th place for Tom Bonen. Not thinking really about races in the early part of the season, but he wants to use Paris-Nice to build up for the one-day classics, races like Paris-Roubaix and, of course, the Tour of Flanders. Those are the races that he wants. Now, back with Thomas Voeckler. Now, I started to talk about Claudio Chiappucci. You remember Claudio Chiappucci? He was a little bit like Thomas Voeckler. He never looked at the handbook. He attacked when he felt good, when he had it in his gut.
When the spirit moves Thomas Voeckler, he goes on the offensive. Even if the riders are tired and the peloton is sort of agreed upon perhaps a little bit softer pedaling, going a little bit easier, don't tell Thomas Voeckler. He chooses those moments to put in sterling attacks. He got the yellow jersey on maybe one of the most dramatic dramatic scenes in many years in the Tour de France, the collision between the car and the two riders, including Juan Antonio Flecha and Johnny Hoogerland.
Well, this man here is going to challenge one or two big names here in this sport this afternoon, because this is Patrick Gretsch, a German rider. We saw him rise to prominence last year in the USA Pro Cycling Challenge in Colorado. 11th time for him, backing that on to a victory he had earlier this year in the Ruta del Sol. He'll be fairly happy with that, just losing 16 seconds. Still, though, despite the fact the rain is coming down, one man remains at the top of the leaderboard in this race. It's Gustav Larsen. Welcome back to Paris-Nice in the opening individual time trial here on day one. And if we're talking about time trialists, well, who else could we not talk about but Tony Martin, the current world champion in the discipline, which is why today he's going to be our Road ID athlete profile.
And now with the winner of the Vuelta time trial, the Dauphiné time trial, national time trial champion of Germany. This is a show of power and strength. Tony Martin is the world time trial champion.
Yeah, my big goal last year was to win the world championships in time trial. And finally I could do it. Last year a dream became true. It was a fantastic day for me. It was my best season. It's not always just about the number of winnings, also the kind of races I won. I was always riding with the best and always could show that I'm the best time trialer. And even to win the Paris-Nice against really good guys, even in the mountain I could stay with them.
Well, Tony Martin may have lost nearly all of his teammates through the attrition war that went on, but at the end of the day, Bob, he kept his calm and he's run out the overall winner.
It was a really, really nice moment for me and shows me that I can be a really good captain, not just in the time trial, also in the smaller stage races.
Tony Martin gets his first ever victory of a stage in the Tour de France.
I think I'm good in time trial because I have a strong character. I can fight really hard, I can hurt myself really hard, and yeah, when I have a goal I can give everything for that. And I really like the time trial because nobody's around you, you don't depend on anything, it's just you and your machine and the road, and I really like that. I think I'm on a really super high level, and at the moment I can't imagine how to get even to go faster now. Yeah, I think there were a long time rumors about that HCC finish. I still had contract for 2012, so I was a little bit in between, nothing. I didn't know if I would stay with HCC or have to look for another team. It was really a hard time, 1 or 2 weeks, but then I realized, okay, now it's the chance for another chance for a good future, to create something special, and so I'm really happy now to be here with Omega Pharma Quickstep.
Well, I've got to say, if he does get any faster than he is at the moment, Bob, it's going to be rather a scary option.
A very scary option, just 26 years of age, 165 pounds. His strength is the time trials. He's the best in the world currently.
Well, he certainly is. And let's not forget that because of the fact that he was the winner of Paris-Nice last year, he will be the last man to start. This has got to be the most aggressive man to ride an individual time trial, though. Thomas Voeckler, he's at battling with himself. He's battling with the machine, battling with everybody else. But the time trial champion of Spain, one of my favorites, Luis Leon Sanchez. He's in the starting house. His jersey slightly different to everybody else's because he is the champion of his country in this discipline.
Luis Leon Sanchez, one of the 3 men in this year's field of Paris-Nice to have won the event before. 2009, he was the overall winner, a very exciting stage. It's a little bit different format in 2009 when Luis Leon Sanchez won the race. The other 2 are Andreas Klöden, and of course the defending champion will start last,
Bob.
Tony Martin, but that was a bit dodgy.
I'm sorry about that, Bob. I thought he'd gone out a little bit too quickly. Have a look at this again. He goes round the corner. It looks as if he's going to get himself a very tight line around that traffic island. Then all of a sudden he says, oops, let's change the direction. That is a very scary proposition. But, Bob, you know, sometimes when you talk about style, when you talk about the individual time trial, that to me is almost perfect.
Perfect position here, Luis Leon Sanchez. You do not win titles without being exceptional at the discipline. Luis Leon Sanchez, one of the best.
Well, talk about cycling champions here, we're looking about another very good man in the individual time trial, Yanni Brakovic, moving across now to Team Astana. This is a man who in the past has beaten riders like Alberto Contador in the mountains, beating him in the time trials. He's got a great future ahead of him.
Yanni Brakovic, one of the stars on the horizon, now on the Astana squad.
Well, Jimmy Engoulevent here from France may well create a little bit of a surprise here this afternoon, because I will never have predicted this. He's challenging the time of Gustav Larsson into the finishing straight now, looking for that little bit of extra energy. Ups on the line. That is going to be the second place finishing time for Jimmy Engoulevent. He has looked as at the tire Gustav Larsson. Look at his face here, Bob. He's pulled himself inside out. That, to me, is a surprise.
Just 1 second slower than Gustav Larsson, an outright specialist in the discipline. I think Gustav Larsson might have had a heart attack just then. Gustav Larsson has been in the finishing house for many, many minutes, waiting to see if anybody could beat his time, and it was Jimmy Engoulevent that came oh so close.
Well, Bob, I thought I was going to get proven wrong as a cycling analyst for a moment there, but in fact, that was the world feed was actually wrong there as it came through. It was wrong by a minute. So, in fact, he was 1 minute and 5 seconds behind. So let's get ourselves back into some semblance of order. Still, the man who leads this race is Gustav Larsson. They're running away now from the start. This is Perrault. He was 10th overall in the Tour de France last year, 6th overall in Paris-Nice. As we go back to a more renowned individual time trialist, Luis Leon Sanchez.
Luis Leon Sanchez out on course, still on that climb. He's a great time trialist, former winner of Paris-Nice. Also, if we cast our mind back to the Tour de France last summer, he was actually the winner of the stage where Johnny Hoogerland and Juan Antonio Fletcher were taken out by the TV car as it passed the breakaway. Also in that break, another rider out on course, Thomas Voeckler. It was Luis Leon Sanchez that got the stage, but Voeckler got the yellow jersey.
Well, not a bad ride by Ivan Basso. I think he went out just to defend himself as he could. But again, you can see the lights shining on the road surface here. It's getting quite tricky running into the finishing line. Well, I thought it was a reasonable time by Ivan Basso, but from those early shots that we get, it's a long way still to go to the finishing line. In fact, Ivan Basso is drifting backwards down the overall standings here on stage 1 here at Paris-Nice. 79th best time for him.
Luis Leon Sanchez getting to the top of the climb, and the category 3 here to start the proceedings in the individual time trial at Paris-Nice, 9th fastest over the top of that. So it's a good ride so far by Luis Leon Sanchez, former winner of Paris-Nice. He's come from the Spanish teams that he was on throughout his career, Case de Parigna, and they are now called Movistar, but he's on the Dutch formation at Rabobank, and he's had a decent ride, a little bit inconsistent last year, but he did come up with a big stage win in the Tour de France, and that's why Rabobank hires riders from Spain. They had Oscar Freire for many years in their number. Oscar Freire has changed teams to Katusha this year, so a lot of pressure on Luis Leon Sanchez from the Rabobank squad to deliver the results.
Well, if you go back to 2009 when he won Paris-Nice, that was dethroning a certain Alberto Contador, and that was they went through the penultimate stages through, of course, the Provence. This, though, is Bradley Wiggins, a star of the Tour de France, a star of the track, a star of the Olympic Games. Now, of course, starting 3 riders from the end in this final moments of preparation for this individual time trial here at Paris-Nice on day 1. Looking concentrated. This is a good ride, though. Look at this, Bob. This is TJ Van Garderen, 23 years of age from the United States, coming around the corner, challenging the times at the top end of the overall standings. He's now challenging the time there of Levi Leipheimer, challenging the time of Thomas de Gent as he comes up to the line. He's stopping the clock there. He's lost himself a mere 9 seconds. I think he's got to be fairly happy with that. Well, as TJ Van Garderen looks there, the overall standings currently look like this, and after the corrections, Larsson still leads with 11.19, but the United States in 2nd and 3rd place will take a very short break. Coming up next, though, it will be the start of Tony Martin. Bradley Wiggins, and now, Bob, you can start to see the rain is starting to come down here on this 6-mile individual time trial. I have to say, a little bit of bad luck for Bradley Wiggins. He's concentrated there behind those tinted glasses. He knows how important this event is. He rode a superb Dauphiné Libéré, a pre-race, pre-Tour de France preparation race last year, as now he gets a little bit of a slip there going through. And of course, let's not forget, as we see Bradley Wiggins, he's lost an awful lot of weight in the last couple of years, but I wonder what he's going to do do this season. He has said that he will try and ride the Tour de France, but for him the most important thing has got to be the Olympic Games. As we cast our minds back to an individual time trial in the Volta Algarve there, just briefly, Bob, that was where he started to show us that he's got great form in the early part of this season.
Well, you don't need a weatherman to tell you which way the wind blows on stage number 1 of Paris-Nice. It's raining for the final starters. Gustav Larsson leading so far, but Bradley Wiggins out on course now, and a steady rain falling. That will make the course much more treacherous, advantage the riders that have already finished, Levi Leipheimer and TJ Van Garderen in 2nd and 3rd.
Looking now into the eyes of the man who starts in the penultimate position, Andreas Kloden, a former winner of this bike race way back in the year 2000, but of course last year, 12 months ago, 2nd place in the overall standings, 36 seconds behind Tony Martin. Yes, a slightly older rider, but an experienced bike rider who knows how to pull off a good performance in an opening time trial like this. Wiggins, Bob, doesn't seem to be afraid of this climb at all. You just notice as well, there's that elliptical chainring now. It may be a time to remember that the man who actually advises a lot of these riders on Team Sky is none other than the American Bobby Julich, and he was an adept of that elliptical chainring.
Bobby Julich, winner of Paris-Nice in years past. He is one of the advisors of the time trial riders on Team Sky. We'll see how Bradley Wiggins can do on the stage.
Well, I don't think I've seen him wearing this World Championships jersey yet. This is the man who is the current champion of the world, Tony Martin. Omega Pharma Quickstep, a brand new mega team, I'd have to say, on the block. He's happy to be with his team. He's concentrated, but as the world champion, Bob, he's got the added pressure on his shoulders of trying to win in this discipline.
New team for Tony Martin this year after the disintegration of the HTC High Road squad. A super team being built around him. Omega Pharma, Quickstep, and Vogler's coming into the finish line now.
Oh, it's awful. This is an awful ride by Thomas Vogler here this afternoon. I wonder if there's been an incident out on the course as he freewheels across the line. 124. Not a happy-looking Frenchman here this afternoon. He's lost himself a minute on the opening day of Paris-Nice. Well, we'll find out a little bit more about that story. But again, Bob, you can see the rain is starting to come down. This is, sorry about the little bit of picture breakup. That's the digital pictures going up to the satellite and down to the finishing line here where we are. I have to say, this man, I don't think that he'll do a great performance here this afternoon, Bob, because he is much better in the longer, tougher individual time trials. What's your call?
Well, he's unbeatable in the time trials in 2011. Less than 1 second loss to Bradley Wiggins in a similar distance just about 3 weeks ago in the Volta Algarve. He is the best in the business in the time trial. If he does a poor event, I would be very surprised. I have to disagree with you on that one, Paul.
Well, there's 5 seconds behind the fastest man to the top of the climb, who, by the way, is Thomas de Gent. So that's a good opening start there by Wiggins, despite the weather conditions. Damiano Cunego, well, he'll stop the clock, 122nd. I think he'll concentrate maybe a little bit more on the Giro d'Italia later on this season, because losing 56 seconds in 6 miles, that's not a great reference for the start of the season.
Louis Vestra coming to the finishing line. Not a bad ride, a time trialing specialist here on the Vacances Soleil team. They've had a pretty good stage. Of course, his teammate Gustav Larsson is leading the event.
Well, it is a solid ride, 19th, losing 20 seconds. That'll keep him right up at the top. I have to say, Vacances Soleil, they are a team who are able to be present in all disciplines of the sport, as he stops the clock there inside of the top 20, but some big names are still to come. Using a massive gear, Luis Leon Sanchez, a Team Rabobank. Still, Bob, he doesn't look to be faltering at all, does he? He pushes himself a little bit further back in the saddle there. That's to manage to keep that big gear ticking over.
He's gotten through the technical parts out on the course. He still has a few tricky corners to go. We'll see what his time is compared to Gustav Larsson. Levi Leipheimer, TJ Van Garderen have both done sterling rides in the time trial, considering they're both great climbers. So exceptional riding by the young man TJ Van Garderen and the American veteran Levi Leipheimer.
Yeah, but talk a bit of bad luck here, Bob, this afternoon. All these guys, maybe the last 15 riders have been dogged by this nasty weather, which has changed in the last 15 to 20 minutes of the afternoon. Luis Leon Sanchez, he's going to slip outside the top 10 here this afternoon. Maybe this early course is just a little bit too short and violent for him at 6 miles in length. He's only just going to clip inside of the top 40 there, Luis Leon Sanchez, losing just inside of 30 seconds on Gustav Larsson, who is still the leader with 11 minutes and 19 seconds. That is the bar to beat.
Also, that's 25 seconds to Levi Leipheimer, and in years past, Luis Leon Sanchez has perhaps been the match of Levi Leipheimer, but that's a big deficit to try to make up from a climber like Levi Leipheimer. Leipheimer. So a great ride by Levi so far in this year's Paris-Nice.
Well, that's Andreas Kloden, second overall last year, former winner of this race. He's got the Radio Shack and Nissan team car right up behind him. Number 21, the leader of Team Sky, or will he be the leader of Team Sky at the end of the day with that great ride by Richie Porte, as we can now start to see. This is the style here, and it looks to me as if maybe Bradley Wiggins has beefed himself up a little bit during the winter months. He lost an awful lot of weight last year, Bob, leading up to the Tour de France. Now, time trial champion of his own country, Jani Brakovic, coming in. Bit of a surprise to me here, but again, Bob, I think the weather conditions have had a serious effect on these last few riders.
A little disappointing here for Jani Brakovic. He wants to be competitive in Paris-Nice. He wants to eventually win the Tour de France, but you're going to have to improve your time trialing to do either of those.
Well, you do. A 72nd time for him. He's lost 40 seconds. That could be on the little tricky descent away from the top of the climb of the Côte de 17 Tournants, the climb of the 17 corners. The 17 corners could put the unwinding of one or two riders here this afternoon. Wiggins looks very fast. He's a master of the individual effort. You just see the way he changed his angle a little bit going around that corner. He's having a look at the two motorbikes in front of him, but he's starting to drift a fraction. He doesn't want to touch those brakes at all now as we start to line up for the last few riders. The big names are now starting to come in to Paris-Nice. Welcome back to the Epic Cycle presented by Michelob Ultra, as we look here at Bradley Wiggins now, and he is storming into town, but the rain is pounding on his shoulders, pounding onto the route here this afternoon. It's going to make it very tricky on this running down towards the finish. He knows that the time to beat is that of Gustav Larsen, 11 minutes and 19 seconds, Bob. He looks extremely fast, this man from the United Kingdom.
Bradley Wiggins put in an exceptional opening climb, second fastest on the day. That's a great result, especially when you consider the changing conditions. Watch how gingerly he goes through that corner right there. Bradley Wiggins had to slow way down to negotiate that. Treacherous conditions for the final finishers, dry course for the early starters, advantage to the men that began the stage earlier in the day.
Well, I got to say, just looking at that, he would have had to have lost between 1 and 3 seconds going around that corner. Now the man who is the expert, the champion of the world in this discipline, Tony Martin, Omega Pharma Quickstep, the brand new team brought together from two very solid squads from last year. He is looking extremely solid on that machine of his. When we talk about him being the champion of the world, Bob, last year he came out and he won almost every individual time trial he participated in, and of course on many occasions beating big Fabian Cancellara.
Fabian Cancellara, for many years the preeminent time trialist in the sport of cycling, but last year in 2011 it was this man, Tony Martin, the current world champion in the discipline, who was the best of everybody. Let's see how Tony Martin can get through these treacherous conditions on today's stage.
Well, we talk about three great American professional cycling teams. Now Australia has something to shout about, because Green Edge, and this is Simon Gerrans of Green Edge, is their cycling team they hope to take to the Tour de France later in the year. He's already been crowned the champion of Australia in the road race. He's already the winner this year of the Santos Tour Down Under, and 26th place for Simon Gerrans, I would have to say, is not too shabby at all, because for 23 seconds we could be talking about this man being a challenger when we get down to the end of this week of racing. So back up the course, here we look at the black bicycle there, the black jersey and black strip with a white and blue band down the middle. Bradley Wiggins, Olympic gold medalist, man who has been a champion of Great Britain, but now what he's thinking about, Bob, is getting himself ready as he goes inside of the final 1 kilometer. He's the third rider from the end to start. Only behind him is Andreas Kloden, and just behind him, of course, is the champion of the world, Tony Martin.
One of the biggest budget teams in the sport of cycling is Team Sky, built around Bradley Wiggins to win the Tour de France because he is such an exceptional time trialist. He's lost many kilos to be competitive in the mountains. He had a great run-up to last year's Tour de France, winning the Dauphiné, but dramatically breaking his collarbone in a crash in one of those big pileups that dogged the first week of the Tour de France in 2011.
Well, this is Vasily Kirienka of Team Movistar. He's coming into the finishing line. It's amazing, Bob. It doesn't seem to be raining here on the finishing line, but you can see the rain The road is slick, the road is wet. 59th place for him, but Team Movistar in those blue jerseys, we'll see them a little bit later on, I would expect, in this week of racing. Now Wiggins, champion of Great Britain in the road race, but here he is trying to get himself a fast time, because now he comes into the final few bends now around these corners. The time to beat is going to be 11 minutes and 19 seconds. Bradley Wiggins knows that is the time he's got to do, and look at this. Larson's time, 11:19. He's going to get challenged, but it's not, because Wiggins drifts away in the final few meters there. He loses out by 1 minute, 0.53 to get himself 1 second, 0.53. Sorry, Bob, the excitement got away with me there, because Bradley Wiggins was so very, very close there to getting himself that victory. Now, behind him, Andreas Kloden. He now knows the time to beat is still sitting right up there at 11 minutes and 19 seconds. And then it's up to Tony Martin, the only two riders left in the race here this afternoon who can beat Gustav Larsen.
Andreas Kloden, the outright leader of Radio Shack Nissan. He needs to do a good opening time trial to set the tone for his team. He has great domestiques, of course, Andy and Frank Schleck for the rest of the week, but Andreas Kloden looking for a good ride in the time trial.
Knocking it down a gear there, getting into that big, massive gear that Tony Martin is well known for. The amazing thing about this man is you never really know how fast he's going, because he always pumps a massive gear in the individual time trial, but he has got the pride for the rest of this season of wearing that very, very special jersey, the jersey with the rainbow bands around it, indicating that he is champion of the world. He too now goes inside of the Flamme Rouge, the red kite, the last 1,000 meters of this bike race here this afternoon, as Andreas Kloden, well, Bob, he has faded a little bit. He's not going to be a challenger on stage 1 of Paris-Nice this year.
Bit of a disappointment here for Andreas Kloden in the opening time trial of Paris-Nice. He'll have a lot of work to do in the climbs to make up the deficit, but he's going to start the Paris-Nice stage number 2 with tomorrow to Levi Leipheimer, who's already finished many, many minutes ago with a good time.
Well, I don't think you'd be too happy with that. 59th best time for him, losing 35 seconds to Gustav Larsen so far, so only one man left out on the course, the champion of the world in the discipline, and still pounding that massive big gear of his. Sorry about the little bit of picture breakup we're getting every now and again. That's because the weather conditions, I think, are playing havoc here this afternoon with the live pictures going from the motorbike up to the satellite and then back down here to the finishing line, because here is the last man around the corner. He's not going to do it. He will not be the winner of the opening stage of Paris-Nice here this afternoon into the town of Saint-Rémy-lès-Chevreuse. He's gone outside the time of Gustav Larsen. Larsen will be the winner, but where will the clock stop for Tony Martin here as he goes further and further down the overall standings here this afternoon? 29th time for the man who is the champion of the world. Bob, I have to say that's a bit of a surprise for me to see him lose 25 seconds.
Shocking result here for Tony Martin in the opening time trial stage. Last year, the best in the world. The weather conditions did deteriorate, but you cannot blame it just on that as evidence of Bradley Wiggins finishing in pouring rain. But Tony Martin, a disappointing opening time trial. This here is Gustav Larsen. He started early, just 1 hour after the first rider. Bradley Wiggins started 3 hours after. Wiggins barely losing to Gustav Larsen by less than 2 seconds. Bradley Wiggins, second on the stage, sets a great tone for Team Sky for the rest of the race. They will be working for Bradley Wiggins to try to win this great stage race to start out the big racing in the season.
Well, the third place rider on the stage is going to be the American, have to say, Levi Leipheimer, looking pretty good in this time trial.
Great form, teammate of Tony Martin. Now, who are they going to work for? Levi Leipheimer doing an exceptional opening time trial, third on the stage, and 30 seconds ahead now of his teammate, Tony Martin.
And fourth place finish for TJ Van Garderen. He said he wanted to ride well at Paris-Nice this year.
He wants to win 3 races this year. Paris-Nice is 1, Amgen Tour of California another, USA Pro Cycling Challenge in Colorado the 3rd, but he's starting his season here. A great ride by TJ Van Garderen. Spectacular result, 4th in the time trial against the very best in the world.
So let's have a look at those results. And Gustav Larsen gets himself the win on the opening day, just a mere second ahead of Bradley Wiggins. Levi Leipheimer looking solid in 3rd, looking for 4 seconds. Further down, Sylvain Chavanel, Levi Leipheimer's teammate, at 12 seconds. A little bit further back, Markel Irizar of Radio Shack Nissan at 8th place there, and Jermel Koppel running out the top 10. So as we look at the face here of Gustav Larsen getting himself the victory on the first stage, we'll take a short break and come back with the presentation, podiums, and of course the interviews. Welcome back. Well, I have to say, Bob, that was a very fine ride by this man as he climbs onto the top step of the podium for his first victory of this year's season. Gustav Larsson, what a win.
Great win by Gustav Larsson for Team Vacances Soleil. He's a time trialing specialist, started pretty early in the rotation of riders, but you got to hand it to him. A stage win is a stage win, plus he'll get the leader's yellow jersey because it's stage number 1 of Paris-Nice this year, 2012.
Well, champion of his country in the individual time trial last year, but probably one of the high spots was the silver medals he got in Beijing when he was second there in the Olympic Games. And I have to say that is going to give him a very good ride tomorrow when he puts on the yellow jersey of leadership. But for him, savouring today's victory.
Today's victory, he was an early finisher. 98 riders came after Gustav Larsson in the individual time trial. None could go better, and he gets the win.
Well, because of that, we have to give him this afternoon the Michelob Ultra Ride of the Day.
Got to hand it to Gustav Larsson in the individual time trial. His specialty, laid it all out on the line, out on the race course, 6 miles of pedaling. That is even as hard as any other stage, excruciatingly painful. Deep in the pain cave, Gustav Larsson is your stage winner.
And of course, our Michelob Ultra Ride of the Day. And because of that Ride of the Day, he's also going to get himself the first yellow jersey of this year's Paris-Nice, and he will go out onto the open road tomorrow with that jersey very much installed on his shoulders.
Interestingly, his teammate Thomas de Gent did the same thing here in Paris-Nice last year, so a great result for Vacances Soleil, their biggest win of the year so far, and a great result for Gustav Larsson.
You may well just notice a little bit of old school there, Bob. There's a little bit of a resemblance of the old collared jerseys that the jerseys used to be in the old days, because there's a change of sponsor now. Le Coq Sportif, which used to sponsor the leader's jersey in this race right up until 1977. It will also be the new sponsor of the jerseys at the Tour de France a little bit later on in this year, and of course the majority of the jerseys that are in the events which are organised by the Armoury Sport Organisation. But I have to say, when we start to have a look at the overall standings, well, it's going to look rather interesting going out onto the open day of racing, because yes, we have seen that Gustav Larsson is stronger than everybody else, but tickling on his tail there, Bradley Wiggins looking for a single second, Levi Leipheimer looking for 4 seconds, TJ Van Garderen looking for 9 seconds, and Thomas de Gent wrapping up the top 5. Teammate of Levi Leipheimer could be the joker in the pack for Omega Pharma Lotto, Sylvain Chavanel looking for 12 seconds, and Markel Irizar of Team Radio Shack Nissan up there in 8th place. A little bit further down, the notables, Taylor Finney in 18th place, Brent Bookwalter in 22nd, and Danny Pate in 38th. So let's catch up with the winner of the day and find out what Gustav Larsson has to say.
It was a nice circuit, I think. I mean, I still have a little bit of wet roads, but not at all like the last guys. And I'm really happy for actually winning. You know, when I see Wiggins be so close, I was impressed that he was going that fast in the descent as he was. So, yeah.
Now, we already saw you impressive at the Olympic Games when you finished second. What does this jersey and this stage victory represent in your career?
I mean, prologues are the best to win, because then you get the leader's jersey, and it's a nice... I mean, it's a really great start for the year for me. It's a good start, and of course I hope to continue this good start though.
How do you rate this victory in your career? Winning a stage on Paris-Nice, it's a big moment for you?
Yeah, of course it's a big moment, and I mean, it rates up there. It's not really, it's a really good moment for me. I mean, it's not the Olympics and it's not the Worlds, and I think the Giro d'Italia stage was also a very nice way to win, but Paris-Nice is a very, very nice race to be able to stand in with the leader's jersey, and it's perfect.
Well, Vacances Soleil does it again, Bob, but I tell you what, there's a lot of pressure for the first week of racing.
Very happy young man there in Gustav Larsson. This is a fantastic result. And like he said, you get the leader's jersey when you win the prologue.
Well, what about this, though, Bob? TJ Van Garderen has come to Paris-Nice with a mission. He started off by getting himself the award for the best young rider.
Got to be pleased with this result for TJ Van Garderen. Confirms what he set out to do at the start of the year and be competitive and perhaps win Paris-Nice. That's a great start.
Well, the best young rider is for the rider who is 25 years and younger in the 1st of January at the start of every season. I have to say, this young man is going to try and defend that title right the way down towards the finish when we get down into Nice. Let's not forget, tomorrow the Epic Cycle Series presented by Michelob Ultra continues with stage 2 of Paris-Nice. It's a stage suited for the sprinters tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the NBC Sports Network. work. And of course, let's not forget, Bob, because if you want to, you can catch up with Tirreno Adriatico, and the coverage there on Universal Sports starts on Tuesday, March the 6th, and we'll bring you all of the action. If you want to find out any of the stories behind the scenes, go to www.nbcsport.com, and you can find out all the stories from Paris-Nice. On behalf of Bob Roll, until tomorrow night, I'm Paul Sherwin saying goodbye.